The Galactic Academy was one of the most respected institutions in the entire Alliance. It floated between the twin suns of the Argon system, glowing like a silver star itself. Every year, young cadets from hundreds of species came to learn, train, and prove that they were worthy of serving among the explorers of the stars. Some came from high-gravity worlds, some from water planets, and others from the cold, dark moons far beyond the rim. All of them believed they were the strongest and the smartest their kind could offer that morning. The grand hall was filled with noise and light. Cadets stood in neat lines while instructors from different worlds stood on the stage. Each cadet wore a silver badge showing their home planet. Most badges showed familiar names like Valen, Oris, or Tarek. Only one badge carried the simple word. That made some of the older instructors exchange glances. Eartha human cadet's name was Mira. She stood quietly near the back row, not tall, not muscular, but calm and steady. Her eyes scanned the hall with quiet curiosity. Around her were cadets with scales, wings, and glowing eyes. She had no such features, only a simple expression, and a small, confident smile when the head instructor, a tall being with silver skin named Ralos, stepped forward. The hall became silent. His voice carried across the chamber as he began his speech about strength, unity, and discipline. His tone was sharp and full of pride. Then, his voice changed slightly when he mentioned one rule no cadet shall challenge an Earthborn. He said clearly it is not recommended and not necessary. A soft wave of laughter spread across the room. Some cadets looked at Mira with raised brows. One whispered something to his friend. Mira heard them, but stayed silent. Ralos continued speaking as if he had not noticed the whispers. He explained that humans, or Earthborn as they were called, were rare at the Academy. Their planet was classified as a borderline death world, meaning it was harsh, unpredictable, and full of dangers. Few believed that a species from such a place could survive among the stars, yet humans had proved otherwise many times. Them that Earthborn were different, they learned fast, adapted faster, and never gave up even when logic said they should. Still, the young cadets were not impressed. They were proud children of the stars. They had studied gravity control, energy weapons, and genetic enhancements. They saw humans as primitive creatures from a small blue world that had only recently joined the galactic community. Mira listened quietly as the speech went on. She could feel the looks on her back, but she did not turn. Her heart was steady. She had trained for this. Back home, Earth had taught her one simple truth. Strength was not about power or size. It was about endurance and choice. It was about standing when others fall. After the ceremony, the cadets were sent to their living quarters. The dorms were clean and full of strange alien technology. Mira shared a room with two other cadets, one from the icy planet of Varn, and one from the floating cities of Aurelia. The one from Varn was named Tyr, a tall cadet with pale blue skin and white hair. The other was Nira, with golden eyes and soft scales across her arms. They both looked at Mira with open curiosity. "So you are the human," Nira said. "Sitting on her bed, I heard Earth is dangerous." "Is that true?" Mira nodded slowly. "It can be. But we are used to it," Tyr laughed softly. "Used to danger, that sounds dramatic." "What kind of danger?" Mira smiled. "Everything. Whether animals, even our own mistakes." "But that is how we learned." The others seemed puzzled. To them, danger was something controlled by simulation rooms and safety shields. The idea of living with it every day felt strange. Still, Mira's calm tone made them listen carefully. The next morning began the orientation tests. Every cadet had to complete the reflex and logic simulation, a virtual challenge that measured reaction speed and problem-solving under stress. It was said that few first-year cadets passed on their first attempt. The training hall shimmered with light as each cadet stepped into their simulation pod. Mira watched others go first. The simulation created artificial worlds filled with moving targets, puzzles, and shifting obstacles. The alien cadets performed well. Reflexes were sharp, and their movements quick. When it was Myra's turn, many watched with curiosity, waiting to see how a human would handle it. The pod door closed, and Myra found herself in a digital world of moving platforms and glowing spheres. A robotic voice spoke, announcing the rules. collect energy nodes while avoiding traps and finding hidden patterns. The ground shifted beneath her feet. At first she moved slowly, trying to understand the rhythm. The spheres darted around. Like insects, and sharp lights flashed when she made mistakes. The first few minutes were rough. She stumbled once and missed a jump. Outside the pod, a few cadets laughed quietly. But inside, Mira focused her breathing. She remembered what her old Earth instructor used to tell her. Pause, look, adapt. So she did. She began to notice the rhythm of the lights, the delay between each movement, and the hidden pattern behind the chaos. Her steps became sure and measured. She stopped chasing the spheres and instead waited for them to come close. One by one, she captured them. Her timing became perfect. The traps that had confused others now seemed predictable. When the simulation ended, the voice said calmly, score 94%. Record ranking achieved. When the pod opened, Mira stepped out, breathing steadily. The room was quiet. Even Instructor Rallos, who stood near the control table, seemed impressed. When Tira and Nira looked at her with wide eyes. The cadets who had mocked her earlier now avoided eye contact. Mira said nothing. She only nodded politely and walked back to her place. So after the test, Rallos spoke again. That was unexpected. Humans truly are unpredictable. But do not be mistaken. This academy tests every species. Talent alone is not enough. Discipline will decide who endures. Later that evening, the cadets gathered in the mess hall. The air was filled with the sound of laughter and conversation. Mira sat quietly with a tray of food that looked unfamiliar but tasted fine. Tyr sat beside her and finally spoke. You surprised everyone today? They thought humans were weak. Mira smiled gently. That is normal. Many do. But humans are not about strength or weakness. Was he afraid of you? Mira looked down at her tray for a moment before answering, not afraid, just careful. Sometimes humans do not stop when others think it is enough. We have a habit of pushing limits until something breaks. That can be useful. Or dangerous. Mira's eyes widened slightly. You say it so calmly. Mira nodded, because it is true. On Earth, calm is how you survive. If you panic, you lose. The rest of the night passed quietly. But across the hall, a group of cadets, from the strong-bodied species known as the Growl, were whispering to each other. Their leader, a large cadet named Reth, smirked as he watched Mira from a distance. He did not believe in warnings. To him, strength was everything. The idea that a small human could outperform him was an insult he could not accept. He leaned toward his friends and said softly, tomorrow, I will test her myself. Let us see if this Earthborn can really handle a challenge. The next morning, the schedule listed physical combat training. The cadets gathered in the arena, surrounded by walls that glowed with protective shields. Rallos stood on the platform explaining the rules of safe sparring. Myra stood in line like the others, listening carefully. She did not know that Reth had already spoken to one of the assistant instructors. Volunteering for a demonstration match. When Rallos asked for volunteers, Reth raised his hand immediately. His voice echoed across the arena. Instructor, I wish to demonstrate. I would like a partner. The human will do. The hall went silent again. Some cadets gasped softly. Rallos looked at Reth, then at Mira. He seemed to hesitate. Cadet Reth, you know the rule. Earthborn are not to be challenged without approval. Reth smiled with forced politeness. Then I ask for approval, Instructor. I believe we all could learn something today. The instructor studied Mira's calm expression. Cadet Mira, do you accept? Mira looked up at him, her eyes steady. She could feel everyone's gaze waiting for her reaction. For a brief moment, she thought of her mother's words back on Earth. Never start a fight, but never run from truth either. She raised her hand slowly and said, I accept. A murmur spread through the arena. Rallos sighed and nodded. Very well. The challenge is accepted. Standard safety protocols will remain active. Begin when ready. Mira stepped into the arena. The floor shimmered beneath her feet, forming solid ground under the shield dome. Across from her, Reth stretched his powerful arms, his muscles tightening like metal cables. The other cadets gathered around the edges, whispering excitedly. To them, this was entertainment. To Mira, it was just another lesson. One she was Ready to learn? The signal light turned green. Both cadets took their stance. Ralos watched from the platform, his silver eyes thoughtful. He had warned them for a reason. He knew what Earthborn could do when pushed too far. But he said nothing. The arena lights brightened, and the air inside shimmered with quiet energy. Every cadet in the hall leaned forward, eyes fixed on the two figures standing in the center. Reth stood tall, his heavy frame glowing faintly from the energy bands around his wrists. His species, the Grawl, were known for their immense physical power and pride in battle. Across from him stood Mira, small in comparison, her stance light and balanced. She had no armor or enhancements. Only her simple gray cadet uniform and calm eyes. The instructor Ralos looked uneasy as he checked the safety systems again. The arena shield shimmered around the floor to prevent serious injury, but he knew it would still hurt if either of them landed a strong blow. He hesitated before giving the signal, but both cadets nodded, showing they were ready. Ralos raised his hand and said, "Clearly begin." Reth charged first. His movements were fast for his size, each step shaking the floor slightly. The audience gasped as his fist swung toward Mira with enough force to knock out a normal being. But Mira stepped aside, smooth and quick. She did not counterattack. She only moved just far enough to avoid the hit. Reth turned and swung again, this time faster. Again, she dodged, her body bending with quiet controls. Some cadets started to whisper. It looked like she was dancing around him, calm and careful. Reth grew irritated. He was used to opponents fighting back or falling quickly. He wanted to prove his power, not chase a small human across the floor. "Stop running," he shouted as he charged again. Mira's tone was even as she answered, then stopped missing. The crowd reacted with surprise and laughter. Reth roared in frustration and tried to grab her arm, but she dropped to the ground and swept his legs from under him. He hit the floor hard, the sound echoing across the hall. Gasps filled the air. Mira stood up quickly and took a step back. Ready again, Reth rose slowly, anger flashing in his yellow eyes. His pride could not accept that a human had thrown him down. He attacked again, this time less wild, but more focused. Myra blocked one strike with her arm, deflecting it to the side, then used his own momentum to step behind him. She placed her hand near his back, but did not strike. Her calm control made it clear that if she had wanted to, she could have ended it. Daralos raised his voice enough, the fight stopped immediately. Reth froze, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling fast. Mira lowered her arm and stepped back again. Ralos walked down from the platform, his silver eyes moving from one cadet to the other. "The match is finished," he said firmly. "Both cadets will return to their lines," Reth wanted to protest. But the warning tone in the instructor's voice stopped him. He turned away silently and walked back to his group. Mira gave a respectful nod and followed the command. The arena remained quiet for several long seconds. Then whispers began to spread again. The story of the human who challenged a Grawl and won without. Even striking was already moving through the crowd when the class ended. The cadets left in small groups, still talking about what they had seen. Tyr and Nira ran to Mira as soon as she stepped out of the arena hall. "That was incredible," Nira said. "You were so calm. I thought he would crush you, but you did not even look afraid." Mira smiled softly. "Fear is normal. I was afraid too, but fear can help you focus if you do not let it control you." Tyr nodded slowly. "You moved like you already knew what he would do." "I did not know," Mira said. "I only watched. People show what they plan before they move. You just have to see it." They walked together toward the dorms, still talking about the match. Around them, other cadets looked at Mira with a new kind of respect. Some avoided her gaze out of embarrassment for having laughed before. Others watched with open admiration. The word Earthborn now carried a different sound in their minds that night. Ralos sat in his office reviewing the training records. The holographic display showed Mira's reflex test results and the data from the arena match. Her reaction speed was far above average. He leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. He had trained hundreds of species, but humans always surprised him. They were fragile in body, yet fierce in will. He remembered the first time he met a human soldier years ago, during a rescue mission on a collapsed moon base. That soldier had kept working even when the entire structure was falling apart, saving dozens before collapsing from exhaustion. Since then, Rollos had respected humans deeply still, he worried. Pride could bring trouble, and some cadets might not accept Mira's quiet victory easily. He sent a message to her record file. Observe closely. Maintain balance between humility and confidence. Then he closed the display and looked out at the stars beyond the glass wall. The academy was peaceful for now, but he knew that peace never lasted long around humans. They had a way of shaking every system they entered the next day. Training moved to survival tactics. The class gathered near the academy's outdoor dome, where the environment simulator could create almost any condition found across the galaxy. Rollos explained that they would face small challenges, building shelters, finding safe food sources, and navigating difficult terrain. For most cadets, it was just practice. For Mira, it felt almost like home. The simulation began with a dry, rocky plain under a bright artificial sun. The cadets worked in pairs. Mira was paired with Tyr. They received simple equipment, a basic toolkit, water rations, and a scanner. The task was to reach the extraction point 2 kilometers away while collecting energy crystals hidden along the path. The terrain shifted with each step, rocks cracking and wind howling around them. Tyr was used to cold planets. The heat made him uncomfortable. Sweat rolled down his pale skin as he tried to keep up. Mira adjusted her breathing and checked the scanner. "There is a crystal about 20 meters east," she said. Two nodded and followed her lead. They reached the spot, but the crystal was inside a narrow gap between two stones. Tyr tried to pull the rocks apart, but they would not move. Mira looked around, found a long piece of metal from the ground debris, and used it as a lever. The rock shifted easily. She reached in and pulled the glowing crystal out. Tyr looked at her with surprise. "You always think of something." Mira smiled. "On Earth, you learn to make tools from whatever is near. Nature does not give you what you want. You have to work with what you have." They continued forward, facing another obstacle, a deep crack in the ground. The wind made it dangerous to cross. Tyr hesitated, unsure. Mira studied the edge carefully and noticed a pattern of stable stones that formed a narrow but safe path. She moved first, steady and light, then helped Tyr cross by showing where to step. When they reached the other side, the extraction beacon flashed green. They had completed the mission faster than most other teams back at the control station. Rollos watched their progress on the monitor. "She adapts faster than any cadet I have seen this term," he said quietly to another instructor. The other instructor, a bird-like alien named Kel, nodded. "Humans are strange. They have limits but act like they do not believe in them. That is what makes them dangerous. They refuse to accept failure later." When the exercise ended, all cadets gathered near the dome exit. Rollos walked in front of them and said, "Good work today. Some of you faced the heat better than others, but one pair showed excellent teamwork and adaptation. Cadets Myra and Tyr, your performance is noted." The others clapped politely. Mira gave a short nod of thanks. Reth stood at the back, his jaw tight. His pride still burned. He could not stand that the human continued to excel. That night in the mess hall, he spoke quietly to a few of his friends. "She keeps showing off," he said. "If the instructors keep praising her, everyone will forget who the real leaders are. I will make sure she faces a challenge she cannot escape next time." His friends looked uneasy, but they did not stop him. Among the growl, pride was sacred. Once challenged, it had to be answered. The following week brought a new event: the planetary trial simulations. Each cadet would face a solo mission inside a virtual world designed to test both physical and mental limits. The instructor warned them that the trial reflected real conditions from uncharted planets. Many cadets felt excited. Some felt nervous. Mira felt calm. She had spent her whole life on a planet that tested her every day. Rollos explained the rule once more. "These trials are meant to show your decision-making and your ability to adapt. Remember, the goal is survival, not combat. If you fail, the system will end the test and you will be safe. But your score will be recorded. Choose wisely how you act one by one." The cadets entered their pods. The room filled with the hum of machinery. Mira waited for her turn, watching others return from their trials. Some looked proud, some tired, a few frustrated. When her turn came, Ralos looked at her for a moment before saying, "Be careful, Cadet Mira. These simulations are based on real death worlds." Mira met his gaze with a calm expression. "Understood, Instructor." She stepped into the pod. The door closed, and the world around her changed instantly. The bright training room faded into a vast jungle filled with mist and the sound of unseen creatures. The air was thick and humid. Giant trees rose above her, their roots twisting like serpents. The ground was uneven, slippery, and full of hidden dangers. A voice echoed in her ear. "Trials start. Objective: survive and reach signal tower within 1 hour." Mira looked around, scanning the area. She found a broken branch nearby and picked it. The next morning, the academy was alive with new energy. The story of Mira's victory in the planetary trial spread through every corridor. Cadets whispered her name in the mess hall, in the training yards, and even during study sessions. Some called her fearless. Others called her lucky. But all of them agreed that the warning about Earthborns was not just a legend anymore. Roas, the head instructor, stood by the large viewing window of his office. Watching groups of cadets move through their daily routines, his mind was heavy with thought. He had seen many talented beings come through the academy, but few had such quiet confidence. Myra reminded him of the first human explorers who had entered galactic space generations ago. They had arrived with nothing but determination and strange ideas about never giving up. They had built alliances, saved colonies, and even helped species that had once looked down on them. He turned as his assistant Kel entered the room. "The council has heard of the human cadets' results," Kel said. "They are impressed, but also cautious. They say she might disrupt the balance among the young recruits." Ralos folded his hands behind his back. "Perhaps," he said calmly, "but that balance was built on underestimation. The galaxy forgets how Earthborns think. They do not follow the same patterns as others. Their strength is not only in body but in will." Kel nodded but still looked uneasy. "Reth and his group are restless. They feel humiliated after what happened in the arena and the trial. If we do not guide them, they might do something foolish." Rolla sighed. "Then I will speak to them before training." Pride can destroy more than weakness ever could. Later that day, the cadets assembled in the combat hall for a lecture. Ralos stood before them, tall and calm. "You are here to learn cooperation, not rivalry," he said. "Your species, your worlds, your pride, these are not meant to divide you. Out there, beyond the safety of the academy, danger does not care who you are. It only cares if you survive." His eyes moved across the room, resting for a moment on Reth and then on Mira. "Some of you have already seen what happens when underestimation meets reality. Right," he continued. "Let that be your lesson. Do not challenge strength for the sake of ego. Challenge only to understand." The words made the hall quiet. Some cadets nodded. Others avoided eye contact. Reth clenched his jaw but said nothing. Mira listened carefully, her hands resting behind her back. She respected Ralos's calm wisdom. She had seen enough of pride and rivalry back on Earth to know how dangerous they could be after the lecture. The cadets moved to the flight simulation wing. This was one of the Academy's most advanced sections, filled with holographic projectors and real pilot pods. Today's task was to complete a rescue mission inside an asteroid field. Cadets had to work in teams of 3, guiding small ships through a maze of spinning rocks while protecting a damaged vessel. Mira was assigned with Nira and Tyr again. Together, they studied the digital map before entering their pod. The others watched them with curiosity, remembering how well Mira had done before. Once inside the pod, the simulation began instantly. The blackness of space filled the screen, and the asteroids moved like slow giants through the void. Nira took the controls for steering. Tyr managed sensors, and Mira monitored the damage reports of the rescue vessel. The first few minutes went smoothly. Nira's flight was steady, and Tyr called out safe paths. Then the asteroids began to move faster as the simulation added gravity waves from a nearby collapsing star. The entire field shifted unpredictably. The rescue ship was spinning out of control. "Hold steady," Mira said calmly. "We will use the pull of the nearest asteroid to slow it down." Nira, bring us close on its left side. Tear, calculate the timing for the gravity drift. Nira's hands moved quickly over the controls. Tear read the scanner and gave her the numbers. Mira watched the sensors, adjusting the sequence until everything aligned. At the perfect moment, Nira fired the stabilizers. Their ship swung beside the spinning vessel, locking its trajectory using the asteroid's gravity. The motion balanced out, and the ship stopped tumbling. Rescue complete, the system voice announced. When the pod opened, the 3 cadets stepped out together. Their score flashed on the main screen, the highest of the day. Ralos gave a small approving nod from the control table. The class clapped. Mira smiled slightly, but said nothing. She preferred quiet success to loud celebration. But not everyone felt the same. Across the hall, Reth watched with narrowed eyes. His pride burned brighter each time the human succeeded. He could not accept that she, a small being from a primitive world, kept surpassing him in every test. When the training ended, he stormed out of the hall without speaking. That evening, while most cadets rested, Reth gathered his group again. "She keeps making fools of us," he said. "The instructors treat her like she is special. I will not let that continue. The next big event is the multi-species trial. I will challenge her there, and this time, no safety shields will protect her. We will see what she can really do." His friends exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, a smaller growl named Iran, said softly, "Reth, the instructors warned us. If you push too far, they might expel you." Reth's eyes flashed. "Then let them. I will not live in her shadow meanwhile." Mira sat on the roof of the dorm building, looking at the twin moons rising above the academy. The cool air brushed against her face. She thought about the day's training, the looks she received, and the quiet tension growing among the cadets. She knew pride when she saw it. On Earth, pride had caused wars and suffering. Here in this peaceful academy, it was beginning to form again. Nira found her sitting alone and climbed up beside her. "You know they are planning something," Nira said quietly. Mira nodded. "I know, but I cannot stop them. Everyone has to face their lessons in their own way. Maybe this is theirs." Nira looked worried. "They will not play fair." "You should tell the instructor," Myra shook her head. "If I run to the instructor, it will only make it worse. Let them come. I will handle it." Her voice was calm but firm. Nira wanted to argue but stopped. There was something in Mira's eyes, not arrogance, but certainty. The next day, the announcement came. The academy would hold the interspecies challenge, a team-based event where cadets from different worlds would compete in a simulated survival operation. It tested leadership, teamwork, and adaptability. The instructors emphasized safety, but the competition was always intense. Ralos assigned teams based on skill balance. To no one's surprise, Mira was made the leader of her group. When the list appeared on the screen, a quiet murmur spread through the hall. Her team included Nira, Tyr, and one unexpected name. Rich. Mira looked up at the instructor with surprise. Ralos met her gaze. His tone was calm. "Sometimes, the best way to end rivalry is to share purpose," he said. "Work together. Learn from each other." Reth's expression hardened, but he said nothing. He simply nodded and turned away. The trial would begin the next morning. The simulated world for the event was a vast desert planet with extreme heat, sandstorms, and limited resources. Each team had to reach an extraction zone while carrying a power core, defending it from simulated attackers, and keeping their energy reserves stable. When the mission began, Myra's team landed on a dune under the blazing light of a digital sun. The air shimmered with heat. Sand whipped across their visors. Myra took charge immediately. "Stay close. Conserve energy." Nira, check the direction of the wind. Tyr, monitor the core's temperature. Reth, take the front and watch for movement. Reth grunted but obeyed. The first few hours were steady. Myra guided them efficiently, finding shaded areas and rationing their energy cells. She shared water when Tyr began to tire. Even Reth started to see that she was not just lucky, she was skilled and disciplined. but as the simulation entered its later stages, a massive sandstorm hit. Visibility dropped to 0. The wind howled like thunder. Their communication devices crackled with static. The team was separated in the chaos. Mira shouted through the storm, trying to regroup. She could barely hear the others. Reth, holding the power core, stumbled into a deep sand pit. The weight pulled him down. He tried to climb out, but the shifting sand dragged him deeper. Panic filled his chest. For the first time, he felt real fear. Through the blinding storm, Mira spotted a faint signal from his tracker. She ran toward it, shielding her eyes. The sand cut across her face, but she did not slow. When she reached the pit, she saw Reth sinking fast. "Throw me the core," she shouted. He hesitated. "You will not be able to hold it. Throw it," she said again, her voice sharp. He obeyed. Mira caught the core with both hands, then dropped to her knees and reached for his arm. The sand pulled at them both, but she dug her boots in and leaned back with all her strength. Slowly, painfully, Reth's hand broke free from the sand. With one final pull, she dragged him out. Both of them collapsed, gasping for breath. The storm still raged. But they moved to a small rock formation that gave partial shelter. Mira placed the core safely on the ground and checked the tracker. Nira and Tyr were still active, but far away. Reth stared at her, breathing hard. "You could have left me," he said quietly. Mira shook her head. "No one gets left behind." "Not in my team." For a long moment, Reth said nothing. The wind began to calm. When the storm finally faded, they found Nira and Tyr waiting near the extraction beacon. Together, they reached the finish line. The large training hall was silent as Mira stood at the center. Her calm face showed no fear, only quiet confidence. Around her, the alien cadets whispered among themselves. They all knew what came next. The Death World trial was a dangerous test created to measure endurance, intelligence, and adaptability. The instructor, a tall being named Varen, spoke with a steady tone, explaining the rules. Each cadet would be sent to a simulated planet based on real-world data, with real dangers and real weather patterns. Survival for even one day was a victory in itself. Mira listened carefully, her eyes steady. Varen looked at her with concern. He had seen strong warriors fail the trial in just a few hours. "You do not have to do this, Mira," he said, his deep voice echoing in the hall. "Humans are not built for such conditions. Many have tried. None have succeeded." Mira's answer was calm. "I want to try. I learn best when I face the unknown." The room filled with soft laughter from some alien cadets. A tall cadet from the planet Shura, known for his hard shell and powerful limbs, crossed his arms. "She will not last 1 hour," he said. His voice was filled with pride. "Humans are fragile. Their bodies cannot stand true pressure." Ira looked at him and smiled slightly. "We will see," she said. The instructor activated the simulation chamber. The walls glowed bright blue, and Mira stepped inside. The door closed behind her, and in an instant, she disappeared from the hall. The other cadets hurried to the viewing platform to watch. The screen came alive, showing Mira standing in a vast, rocky landscape. The planet's atmosphere was thick, the sky covered in orange clouds. Strong winds moved the dust like waves on a red sea. The Death World was a place of endless danger. The temperature changed quickly, the air was heavy, and strange life forms roamed the ground. Mira took a deep breath. Her training uniform adjusted to the new climate, but she could still feel the intense heat. She looked around, scanning the horizon. No signs of shelter were near. She had to move fast. She started walking toward the nearest ridge. Every step was slow and careful. The ground was uneven, with cracks that looked small, but were deep enough to trap a foot. As she climbed the rocky slope, the wind grew stronger, pushing against her. She leaned forward, using both hands to steady herself. Her mind worked quietly, observing everything. The direction of the wind, the shape of the rocks, the movement of the shadows. She was learning the world, bit by bit. Back in the control room, the cadets watched in silence. The instructor folded his arms, watching her movements. "She is not rushing," he said softly. "She is observing. That is how humans work. They study before they act." Mira reached the top of the ridge and saw a wide valley below. Strange plants grew there, their leaves silver and sharp. She knew she needed water, food, and a place to rest. The valley might offer all three, but it could also hide danger. She decided to go anyway. The wind was calmer there, and the plants might provide cover. As she moved closer, the ground began to shake. Something large was moving beneath the surface. She froze. Her heartbeat quickened, but she stayed still. Dust lifted around her as the ground split open, revealing a massive creature. It looked like a mix of stone and flesh, with glowing eyes and a mouth full of crystal teeth. It roared loudly, shaking the valley. Myra took a step back, then another. Running would draw attention. She thought quickly. There was a pile of rocks nearby, and the slope behind her was steep. If she could make the creature move that way, it might fall. She picked up a small rock and threw it to the side. The sound caught the creature's attention, and it turned. She threw another rock farther away. The creature followed the noise, moving with heavy steps. Mira used that moment to climb the nearest hill. She moved fast but silent, keeping her body low. When the creature reached the edge of the slope, it turned its head and spotted her. It roared again and charged forward. Mira kept climbing until she reached a large stone ledge. As the creature approached, she used her full weight to push a heavy boulder down the hill. It rolled fast, striking the creature's leg. The ground broke under its weight, and the monster fell into the valley with a loud crash. The dust rose high, covering everything. Myra stood still for a long moment, catching her breath. She was safe for now. She sat under the ledge using a piece of metal from her training pack to create a small reflector. She used the sunlight to dry her sweat and then collected water from the condensation that formed on her suit. It was not much, but it was enough. In the observation room, silence filled the air. The instructor finally spoke. She used the environment. She did not fight the beast with strength. She used her mind. One of the alien cadets, who had doubted Mira before, whispered, "She is different. She is not like the others." Mira spent the next hours exploring the valley. She found a group of plants that produced a sweet-smelling liquid. She tasted a drop, testing it carefully. It was safe. She collected more and stored it in her pack. As the sun began to set, the temperature dropped quickly. The hot air turned cold, and winds returned with greater force. Myra built a small shelter using stones and the thick leaves she gathered earlier. She wrapped herself inside, keeping her body warm. The night was full of sounds. Distant cries, shifting rocks, and deep rumbles. Mira stayed alert but calm. She knew fear could lead to mistakes. She thought of Earth, of the times when her home faced storms and floods. Humans always found ways to survive. They adapted to every danger, no matter how great. That thought gave her strength. The next morning, Mira woke early. Her energy was low, but her focus was sharp. She climbed another ridge to understand the terrain better. From there, she saw the outline of an old structure far away. It looked like the remains of a research base. If she could reach it, there might be supplies or a signal beacon. The journey was long. She walked through dry lands, crossed shallow rivers of thick blue liquid, and avoided creatures that moved like shadows in the mist. Her body grew tired, but her mind stayed strong. Each step was a choice to continue. When she finally reached the structure, she found it half buried in dust. Inside, broken machines and damaged panels covered the floor. She searched through them, finding a working power cell. Using her training knowledge, she connected it to a communication device. The device sparked to life. She sent a short signal to the base, marking her position. As the signal reached the Galactic Academy, alarms rang in the observation room. Myra had completed the full trial. Not only had she survived, but she had also found and repaired a beacon, something no cadet had done before. The instructor smiled for the first time in many years. The human has done what others could not. She has made the impossible possible. When Mira was brought back to the training hall, everyone stood in silence. She looked tired but peaceful. Her hands were scratched, her uniform dirty, but her eyes shone bright. The cadets, who had once laughed, now watched her with respect. Varen stepped forward. "You have proven your strength," he said. "But more than that, you have proven the strength of your kind. The Earthborn spirit is not in muscle or armor. It is in heart and mind." Mira bowed her head slightly. "We learn by facing what others fear. That is what makes us human." The instructor nodded. "From this day forward, your name will be remembered here. You have changed how the galaxy sees your people." The hall filled with quiet applause. The cadets who once doubted her now stood tall, saluting the human who faced a death world and came back stronger. Mira looked around at them and smiled. She had not only won a challenge, she had earned respect for all of Earth that night. As the stars filled the academy's sky, Mira sat by her window, thinking about home. The stars seemed closer now, not as distant as before. She knew that somewhere out there, new worlds waited, and she would be ready for them, just as she had been ready for this one. She whispered softly to herself, "We are small, but we endure." And in that quiet moment, even the galaxy seemed to listen. The next morning at the Galactic Academy began with whispers echoing through every corridor. News about Mira's success in the Death World trial had spread faster than any announcement. From the training halls to the observation towers, cadets from every species were talking about the Earthborn who had done what no one else could. In the main hall, the great flag of the Academy shimmered above the gathering crowd. The hall was filled with cadets, instructors, and senior officers. The air buzzed with curiosity and excitement. For years, the Academy had believed that humans were too weak, too fragile to stand against the galaxy's harshest challenges. But now that belief had been shaken. Mira walked quietly through the long corridor toward the hall. Her steps were steady, though her body still carried the weight of exhaustion. She had only slept a few hours after the trial. Her uniform was freshly cleaned, but the faint marks of her journey were still visible. She did not try to hide them. They were proof of what she had endured. As she entered the hall, every voice went silent. Rows of cadets turned their heads to look at her. The tall alien from Shura, who had once mocked her, lowered his gaze. Even the proudest species, known for their strength, remained quiet. The instructor, Varen, stood near the front with other high-ranking officers. His eyes met hers, and he gave a small nod of respect. The ceremony began. The Academy Chancellor, a wise being named Terran, stepped forward. His voice carried through the entire hall. Yesterday, a cadet of Earth completed the Death World trial. She not only survived but showed intelligence, adaptability, and courage that surpassed expectations. For generations, this academy taught that humans are unpredictable. Today, we have learned that unpredictability is a strength. He turned to Mira. "Step forward, Cadet Mira of Earth." Mira stepped onto the stage. She stood tall, her face calm. The Chancellor continued, "You faced a world that breaks even the strongest warriors. You succeeded not through power, but through observation, patience, and will. These are the true strengths of an explorer." He handed her a silver badge with the symbol of the Academy's highest honor. The hall erupted into applause. The sound filled every corner of the building. Mira bowed slightly, holding the badge close to her chest. She had never cared much for awards, but this one meant something deeper. It meant that her people, the humans of Earth, were no longer seen as weak. After the ceremony, many cadets approached her. The tall Shuran warrior who had doubted her was the first to speak. "I was wrong about you," he said quietly. "Your strength is different. It is the kind that endures when all others fail." Mira smiled. "We all have strengths. We just show them in different ways." Another cadet, a small being from a water world, asked her, "How did you stay calm when the monster attacked you?" "I would have run," Mira thought for a moment before answering. "Fear is not the enemy. It is a signal. It tells you to think, not to panic. I listened to that signal. That is how humans survive." The cadets listened carefully, their faces full of respect. For the first time, they saw humanity not as fragile, but as quietly strong. Later that day, Mira returned to her quarters. The room felt peaceful. She placed the silver badge on the small table by her bed and looked out the window. The stars shimmered beyond the transparent wall. Each one looked like a story waiting to be lived. She thought about Earth, her home, with its blue oceans and green forests. The memory filled her with warmth. There was a knock at her door. It was Varen, the instructor, who had once warned everyone not to challenge Earthborn. He stepped inside, his long cloak brushing the floor. "You have changed this place," he said softly. Mira turned to face him. "I only did what I could. I wanted to show that humans are not what others think." Bron smiled slightly. "You did more than that. You reminded us what it means to fight with purpose. We have strength, but sometimes we forget how to use our minds. You showed us that true strength is balance." He paused for a moment, then added, "There is something I must tell you. The Council has decided to open a new program for human cadets. They want to invite more students from Earth to join the Academy." Myra was surprised. "Truly?" "Yes," he said. "They believe your people have much to teach us. The way you adapt, the way you learn, the way you find hope, even when all odds stand against you. You have opened a door for others." Mira smiled gently. "That is the best reward I could ask for." That evening, a grand dinner was held to celebrate her victory. The hall was filled with light and laughter. Cadets from all planets shared their stories, their meals, and their songs. Mira sat among them, feeling like part of something larger than herself. A cadet from a desert world asked her to tell the story of her trial. She began slowly, describing the burning wind, the shifting ground, and the sound of the creature's roar. But she did not speak of fear or pain. Instead, she spoke about learning, about watching, about understanding how every challenge could be turned into a path forward. The cadets listened with fascination. When she finished, there was silence for a moment, then loud applause. Someone raised a glass and said, "To Mira, the Earthborn who changed the stars." The room echoed with cheers. Mira laughed softly. It felt strange to be the center of attention, but in her heart she was proud. Not for herself alone, but for her entire species. Humanity had always been underestimated, yet time and time again, they found ways to endure. Later, when the celebration ended and the hall grew quiet, Mira walked outside to the Academy's garden. The night was calm, the air filled with the scent of alien flowers. She sat on a bench beneath a glowing tree, thinking about everything that had happened. She remembered the first day she arrived at the Academy, when everyone looked at her with doubt. She remembered the first test, where she used her mind to solve what strength could not. She remembered raising her hand to challenge the impossible, even when no one believed in her. And now, she had done what no one else dared. Footsteps approached behind her. It was Terran, the Chancellor. He sat beside her quietly. "You know," he said after a moment, "long ago, when I first heard that humans wanted to join the Academy, I did not think they were ready. I believed they would fail. I was wrong." Mira looked at him with a small smile. "We all learn by trying. That is what makes us grow." He nodded. "Yes, and you have helped us all grow. The galaxy will not forget this lesson. You showed that power is not only in muscles or claws or weapons. It is in the will to keep walking even when the road disappears." They both looked up at the stars. Terran continued, "There will come a time when you will lead missions beyond this galaxy. When that time comes, remember that courage is not about being unafraid. It is about acting even when you are." Mira nodded slowly. "I will remember." As the night went on, she stayed in the garden, watching the stars move across the sky. Somewhere far away, a small blue planet spun quietly, full of life and hope. She thought of her family and the people who had believed in her. They would be proud. The next day, she began training again. Even though she had already proven herself, she did not want to stop learning. She trained harder than before, helping younger cadets who struggled with their lessons. She shared what she had learned about patience, observation, and creativity. Soon, many cadets started calling her instructor Mira. Even though she was still a student, she never let the praise change her. She stayed humble and focused. To her, the real victory was not in being called strong. but in inspiring others to believe in themselves. Weeks passed, and new cadets from Earth arrived at the academy. They looked at Mira with admiration and hope. When they saluted her for the first time, she felt a wave of emotion. The dream she had carried was no longer hers alone. It belonged to all of them. One day, as she watched the new group train under the bright light of two suns, Viren approached her once more. "Do you plan to stay at the academy forever?" he asked. Mira smiled. "No, one day I will go back to Earth, but not yet. There are still lessons to learn and more worlds to see." Iran nodded. "When you leave, you will not just be a graduate. You will be a symbol. The story of Myra of Earth will be told for many years." Myra looked out at the training grounds, where cadets of every kind worked side by side. "Let it be more than a story," she said. "Let it be a reminder that we are all capable of more than we think." As the twin suns set behind the academy towers, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, Myra stood quietly. The stars began to appear again, bright and endless. She took a deep breath and smiled. The instructor had once warned, "Do not challenge Earthborn." But she had challenged. She had survived, and she had changed everything. From that day onward, whenever a new cadet doubted themselves, instructors would tell the story of the human who raised her hand and said, "I challenge you," and proved that courage and intelligence can shape the future of the galaxy.